My dear friends, I would like to extend a very warm welcome to all of you here today on our program, The Professors. It brings me a great deal of joy to host Dr. Yoav Ashkenazy once again on our show today, who is our dear and esteemed friend, joining us from beautiful Vienna, Austria, as we continue our series exploring the origins of faith. Actually, we're not really at the beginning anymore. Yes, we've already gone through a few chapters with you from prehistory to history, and now we want to get into it. Today we want to focus on Egypt, yes, on ancient Egypt, and see so how do the concepts of belief, ritual, and religion develop in that region, and what exactly occurs in Egypt during the major transition to agriculture.
Let us establish in the context for our discussion. We previously discussed hunter-gatherer groups whose deities are quite vague. It might be an animal, a parent, or perhaps an ancestor, but they are largely immersed in a system of animism. All things are somehow interconnected through the essence of breath or spirit, though it really depends on the specific culture. Ultimately, there's no clear distinction for the gods. So it's an animal, and it's a parent, and it's some kind of supreme being. It's not. The deities are still vague, and they are very, very personal to the tribe. Anyone who belongs to the tribe is a person. Anyone who doesn't belong to the tribe is simply nothing. It's impossible to communicate with him because he doesn't share the world we create through these rituals and deities. The movement towards polytheistic gods, we saw it through semi-nomadic hunter-gatherer societies, and the case of Hawaii, which is a nascent society. And there we already see that the gods begin to take on a clearer form, and accordingly, clear political leadership also emerges. Political leadership, where a chief manages everything and is always present, also features a semi-divine ruler. We saw progress, a movement there. The polytheistic gods of Sumer and Akkad are already well defined. Oh, it's clear who they are. Yes, you have Enlil, so he's the god of he's the ruler of the world, and he's the god of the storm, and so on. You have Enki, so he is the god of wisdom and water. We have some clear symbols associated with him. He has several functions. He is also connected to art, craftsmanship, and also to simply to a natural element. And once the gods are translatable, as happened between Sumer and Akkad, yes, the Akkadians took the Sumerian gods and translated them into their own, greatly reducing the pantheon and making them even sharper and more defined. In other words, it is possible to translate. And at some point, not only do they start translating, but the first ones actually in the Bronze Age are the Kassites. They really create for you names. This god in Amorite is his name in Amorite, in Hurrian, in Elamite, in Kassite, in everything before the Hittite in Sumerian. What does this create? It builds international law and a global world. I'm fine with that. I reach Alex's city and ask, you're in Egypt, but who am I in Canaan? I'm the absolute beast. Which god here is the storm god? Yes, Baal. Who is the chief god in Canaan? So he tells me we have Set. So I'm fine. So I'll go to the temple of Set. Now it's safest to worship all the gods. Why neglect anyone? And so there is no problem. There is no issue of God over God, and there is a basis for international law. You honor this God, so in this city they simply let you pass. Yeah, here the law is such and such. It's a way to communicate. A creation is formed, a shared universe, and the Egyptians are part of this. But they are a story. It happens in a way, in a manner, at a very late time for them. But basically, Egypt starts around 5500. You can start talking about agricultural settlements in the area of not the Delta, but what's called Upper Egypt. Upper, I always get them mixed up, lower and upper, but not the Delta, the one that's more towards Ethiopia. We see agricultural kingdoms with a fairly homogeneous population. And it's interesting because Egypt is the first national kingdom to be formed. I mean, Akkad and Sumer certainly is a national. And every culture that falls into that, whether it's Assyria, whether it's Mitanni, whether it's every culture that develops in the region, thousands of years later develops from them. Israel and Judah and the Greek polis. What happens after that is generally a city-state. And here in Egypt, we have a national kingdom, a kingdom with people who are more or less similar. One can start talking about Egypt in general. So really Egypt in the pre-dynastic period, even though there isn't an Egypt yet, there are small kingdoms, each worshipping a different god. There became a specific moment in the distant past when the great kingdom of Nakada, which was situated in the heart of Upper Egypt, was conquered by the powerful forces of Hierakonpolis, and the god Horus rose to become the supreme chief deity. From that significant moment forward, the entire land of Egypt was known as Tower. And the lands that were so greatly desired, land 2, the two distinct lands, and Pharaoh will forever be, without question, from this moment onward, the supreme ruler of these two lands. And because we started with many small kingdoms, and we will see that there are intermediate periods of war, the Egyptian myth is an interesting myth, similar to the Sumerian one in that it pushes back chaos. We'll get to the details in a moment, but first let's talk a bit about history. We push back the chaos and give it the place it deserves. Chaos is the nun. Nun is the word in Egyptian. It's a kind of primordial darkness, a void. Now the world cannot exist without chaos. For there to be birth, there must be death. For light to come, there must be night. But we must keep chaos in its place. And as we saw how peripheral cultures responded to fragmentation, how they push away the anxiety, the chaos, this vulnerability in their own way through imitation and ritual and the creation of a stable world and so on. Now we see how a different kingdom deals with this chaos. Actually, the first kingdom the first period we can really talk about Egypt is between 2600 and 2150. This is called the Old Kingdom. And we started to see arts and death rituals and such here, but we still don't have a cult here. That implies that we are still not actually feeding the gods. It is really more about making the gods feel present by simply speaking their names aloud. Do you remember that part? We've discussed this regarding both images and words. The thing participates in its own representation. We do not have representation in the sense of a supermarket label, where the label reading meat is distinct from the meat itself. Rather, the image of God is, in a certain sense, God himself. His presence is there. The same applies to his name when we bring it into existence. The struggle against chaos was a daily one, but minute by minute, every hour there was a ritual. The king was meant to perform it, but he couldn't stay up all day. So the priest stepped in. He declared, I am only the substitute. And repeating his first words upon entering, I replace Pharaoh. I am not Pharaoh. Let that be clear.
I have a question. And if I may interrupt you, in Egypt, we know, especially in the Middle Kingdom and also in the New Kingdom, the role of the Pharaoh in this connection between the gods and the state is, in my opinion, much more integral than the role king plays in religion, even in Mesopotamia, even in Assyria. I mean, I am literally in Egypt, you see.
I think that there are two things to remember here. Egypt is an insular culture, and therefore the temple stands at its center. What is the temple, actually? It's a giant library of the entire world. It displays both the gods and the stories, as well as everyday life. Truly, everyday activities, how things are done, how things are built, animals, plants. In essence, the temple gathers the world within itself in order to shut itself off from it. And for thousands of years, Egypt has been very insular. It is natural that its elite would be much more integrative, much more involved, much more powerful and controlling, and part of things. Aside from the terrible anxiety about chaos, and the fundamental perception that the pharaoh's role is essentially to push chaos out. Now, in this kingdom, in the 4th dynasty, I think, they build the pyramids. They do it once. It doesn't last more than it's just too big, national effort. But only a national kingdom can carry out such a crazy project. Actually, it is likely that everyone had to contribute some time working on the pyramids. They were not constructed by slaves. Oh, and I should also mention that we have cults and we also have human sacrifice, right? They're burying people, and yes, with the strong man. around this time, more or less, we're talking about an elite of 2,000 people that is a traveling court. Also is in the situ of the Mesopotamian gods, where we are transported during festivals. Here, the entire court moved from city to city. Mind you, this is another way to create stability. You're always in a different city, always with a different god. And at this point, Pharaoh is simply a man guided by the gods. He has a unique connection with them. Yushata, he is not holy, he is not God himself, but the gods guide him. We will see later that Pharaoh settles in the heart when the idea of the heart appears. He settles in the human heart, and this is already after he has received divinization, and then the possibility of a simple direct relationship with an inner God is created. This is an interesting thing, but it is later. After they have conquered the Old Kingdom, we have a super cruel and crazy intermediate period. Civil wars between 2150 and 2040 BC and Egypt, and the Middle Kingdom that would follow was left with terrible trauma from it. During this time, local leaders emerged, and each one presented themselves like a mafia boss, acting as a patron. Yes, everyone. And it will also feed into the disruptor character later on. The patron who looks out for people, ensures justice for them, and ensures that basically they won't be taken advantage of, that they won't be robbed. I listen to widows. There are all sorts of texts like that. An orphan and a widow. It's possible that's where this phrasing came from, because that's what they say there. I saw it in some inscriptions on the pillars. I had to go back and check the papyri, and it's where he literally says, I helped a widow with this. In other words, it's something very, very deep, helping the weak.
You can see this in Ugarit as well, yes.
Oh, I don't know. I didn't know that about Ugarit yet, but
in Ugarit there is Daniel, the judge of justice. Why is he the judge of justice? He judges the orphan and the widow, just like in the Bible.
Right, but keep in mind, it's much later. We're talking here.
I totally agree. Yeah, you are in a different place right now.
Absolutely. And we are in a period where Egypt is still closed. Egypt opens up around 1500. You have to remember 1600, but the 100 years of Akhenaten, but really from about 1505 BCE. But we haven't reached that yet. So we see the Pharaoh is the king. He is guided by the gods. And then we have the image of the Pharaoh as a patron. Because that is how every ruler of every small region presented himself. Around 2040 to 1650, the Middle Kingdom is formed. And here, Ma'at begins to grow. Ma'at is the Egyptian wisdom. It has three faces, the order of the universe. Well, I mean, the truth of understanding things and the justice of society. How should society be run? And they all converge. This is a kind of ethics. It is not an ethics that the gods are involved in. The gods they aren't. Now, of course, it's their directive. Well, not exactly a directive, but it's implied by them. But they don't mandate this ethical code. They don't enforce this ethical code either. And that's very important. Like, the Egyptian gods have no interest in human justice. Yeah, they don't intervene. You must serve them in specific ways, address them, and so on. But they aren't the ineffable name, nor the Lord. They aren't gods with a personal morality that they demand you uphold. That's why you can't really blame them. Yes, and you can't just say to him, but like Moses did, "What's up, Lord? You're a merciful God. Why destroy?" And the Lord says, "I have forgiven as you asked." Oh, there's no such thing. That can't be. And in the Middle Kingdom period, it is under the trauma of the chaos of the intermediate period. Another very interesting aspect of this development is that the entire elite is educated in the ethics of governance. Everyone is educated to some extent, and the king increasingly becomes a servant of the gods. He is their servant before the gods. He is a servant to the people. He is a shepherd and a patron who ensures justice and demands loyalty. And now, the longing for the king is internalized within the heart of every individual. The moment he is presented as God, you already have God himself inside, but it's not happening yet. In 1650, a group of Hyksos, I don't know how to say the word. I don't know if anyone knows how to say the word Hyksos. I've heard researchers, 4 or 5 researchers, each one is I have no problem with that. Eric Honung is a key researcher, and I'm also reading Jan Assmann. I chose them because they disagree on vital points. I mostly side with Assmann. The Hyksos worship set, as he is ostensibly Baal. If Israel Fickelstein is right, then these are Canaanites. We don't know. And they worship Set and rule Egypt until about 1500 BCE, until a Pharaoh arises. Forgotten his name? The one kicking them around? Was it Sharmusho or Sharmusho? I can't recall. Oh, he is really kicking their asses, and he is throwing them all the way out of the land of Egypt. And in this period, we are already beginning to see an inflation of mythology and reflection on mythology and its significance. The king becomes divine, and if we remember that he had already been internalized into the heart of the individual and the path and all that, then we are already talking about an individual who can turn inward.
I mean, this classic image that many of us have in our heads of Pharaoh as some kind of god presented as a deity, that's only in the New Kingdom, right?
But mostly, yes. There were flashes where they claimed it, even here. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. That is not quite the whole story, but the king suddenly becomes Horus, the main god. I will cover the myths later on. There was Osiris, who was murdered. A story of gods emerging from other gods. Though, as I mentioned, what is interesting about the Egyptian myth is that in one of the Egyptian creation stories, God creates through speech.
Yes, it is truly a Memphis story. And within that Memphis story, they often use...
I suspect it's getting late. Memphis is not exactly a new beer.
Yes, they are really living in a similar system.
Memphis is Cairo, by the way, for those who want to know.
That's right.
We have at least 3 foundational stories, though in truth there are many more. There is the God who brings himself into existence, followed by the 8, which then become a 9. The heavens, the earth, and so many other wonders. Whenever we speak of this God, we are referring to the deity known as Atum. The sun god, he is not the sun, he is the sun god. Only Akhenaten turns him into the sun. Akhenaten, by the way, is a regression in my view, but we'll talk about that in a moment. The second story is the story of Ptah. Well, yes, that's already...
He creates through speech. He creates the world through speech.
First of all, a perception of the world is born in his mind. Yes, there are endless interpretations like that. Jesus is that plan, according to a lot of early mythology, Christianity, and so on and so forth. But he had the idea in his head, and he said, and it was done. He said, and it was done. We know this from somewhere, but also the God that is created automatically, autochthonous from within existence. Those who read Genesis as in the beginning, the Lord was revealed. Do that. I mean, at the beginning, it was explained, my Lord, just like in, I don't know if that's true. By the way, I'm not getting into those things. The third story is actually a dual story. They bring forth divine pairs, Nun and Naunet. They are the vast, swirling primordial waters, He and Hauhet, the essence of infinite chaos. Keita and Ketet represent the very essence of darkness. What's truly important to note here is that Amun remains the central deity. Indeed, this is the ancient story of Thebes. He becomes central to the New Kingdom story. Hence the name Amun-Ra. Now, Ra is the sun. Sasan is debated whether they govern the god's nature or are part of nature itself. That's not vital to our discussion. The god is already split into several deities anyway. He is the hawk, the sky, and the no problem. No, he doesn't necessarily have to be identical to that. Anyway, the New Kingdom, 1550 to 1070, is the time when Egypt becomes a true empire. It wasn't an empire before that, in the sense that it hadn't expanded its borders or absorbed any foreign lands. At this time, because she defeats the Hyksos, she also gains control of Canaan, and it reaches as far as Syria, southern Syria, and she even conquers northern Iraq for certain periods, and she has incredible relations with the Hittites. They want, for example, one of the Nefertiti, I think, wants her son to marry Suppiluliuma, the amazing Hittite king. Anyone who knows isolationist Egypt or reads the reports of the Greeks who say that the Egyptians are arrogant xenophobes. There's an expression for animals, they call foreigners animal types. Now, then, all of a sudden, the doors of Egypt began to open wide. They also maintained a remarkable relationship with the Hurrians, specifically the Mitanni Hurrians, and I was astonished to observe that the Egyptians treated them as equals. Their cultural traditions and political alliances were shared, alongside a significant Babylonian influence. Not Babylonian, Mesopotamian culture as a whole moved this way into Egypt, and in fact, not only is Horus now the god, but the temple is called the temple of the entire world. In other words, the entire world is contained within the temple. And in this day and age, we see divinities that can be more universal. Suddenly, the old animism that always sits in the background, you see all sorts of sparks, and you see a lot of evil, or just evil, or a gateway as a god who is transcendent, even above the gods. And he also goes and becomes a god of ordinary people. From now on, it's not just the king who is guided by the gods. The individual can also be guided by the gods, and the idea of God as a savior, not a savior of the afterlife, a savior in this world. There is no such thing. In the afterlife is not the point. That the afterlife is a continuation of life. Like we come, there is no death in the final sense, like we have here in these worlds. Sometimes God is described as beyond the cosmos, sometimes as a supreme God of whom all other gods are manifestations, and sometimes as the cosmos itself. It's an interesting thing. All these real complex and complicated speculations are shattered in the 13th century when someone named Akhenaten comes along and says, stop. Akhenaten...
114, right? He's coming.
1300. Sorry, I always get mixed up because of the 1-3 and the confusion around it. Yes, that's right. 1400, 1300 and something. And Akhenaten creates a revolution that lasts 20 years. He closes all the temples. He insists, no, absolutely not. There is no God. There is but one God. The radiant sun disk is the true God, not some distant deity. The disk is the only God. And in a certain sense, it really takes us back to the past. And in another sense, it is truly leading us toward the future. Now, I will explain exactly what I mean. Saying there is one God doesn't hurt anything in the ancient world. It's a very non-threatening monotheism. Why? Because there's no problem translating it. The moment he says his name, I translate it to Akhenaten. Akhenaten tells you, no, there's no translating. There is only the sun. All the other gods are fake. The moment you say that all the other gods are fake, no. Wait, just manifestations. They perceive them in an inaccurate way, but fake news, a lie. Not real. You are creating a terrible crisis in the ancient world, and of course, the Mosaic religion goes even further and says, I am that I am. What does it harm? It harms the possibility of translation. It harms the international world that was born out of the polytheistic world. It is no longer possible to translate the gods. Or what is the true meaning of whatever will be, will be? It tells you this is basically what Ganashman calls a counter region. She says she comes in and punches the center of the.
He also, by the way, one could even say in his later period, he really worships the sun. That is to say, it is in.
It's no, I didn't see it. I didn't see it. It could be that he's turning her in, but it still remains.
It portrays her in a way that she's not really present here. As if, I mean, it's something distant. It has no body. It has nothing. At first, there are the hands where they like draw hands. Then even those hands aren't drawn. I mean, it's like a process that's very.
It's going to, but there's a regression here too. I don't know if it's a regression. It's a regression from the point of view of someone who thinks that what's happening in the axial age is progress in human thought. You don't have to see it that way. But the regression is that humans no longer have access to God. Access to the God is reserved solely for Akhenaten himself, who is also a God in his own right, he alone, and you can connect to the God only through the service that Akhenaten provides him in obedience, which was basically common in the ancient world. But this whole idea, right, which actually comes with the idea of a heart that develops in the middle period, and well, yes, and reaches its peak in the new kingdom, where you have a heart, and this heart is every bad thing you do weighs it down, and when you die, then they weigh the heart against the feather. And that if the heart is heavier than the feather, you go to the dark world, to the world of, and if not, you go to, and here we already have the beginnings of heaven and hell. Pay attention. That is to say, there is, and the little allows you. For the priest, it's no problem to keep his heart light. He enters the temple every single day and he declares, I have not cheated anyone with my weights. I have not committed this act. I have not failed to offer the sacrifice, not this. And I certainly didn't do that. And every statement that is not true weighs heavily upon his heart. But he has found a way around it, hasn't he? That is simply the way he lives. If he follows these strict rules and sacred rituals, he will be redeemed. For the simple, even the smallest gesture counts. This wisdom decides your path. The vision will fail exactly 20 years after his death. Within 20 years, no one will even remember that he existed. He did conclude that said, his final statement, you have disappeared, and the erasers are busy removing all traces of you from everywhere. The reason he disappeared is simple. He didn't create a religion, he didn't create a priesthood, and he just closed the old temples. They only worshipped him, and he was basically the guy. He was the high priest, the king, whatever you want to call it. They didn't really want to continue with him.
But even today, there are researchers who think he was a prototype for the Israelite religion, you know, that Moses rose from there, and perhaps some of the people who were influenced were there. I don't know, all sorts of things like that. I talked to a professor about it.
There are complaints.
I've talked to him about it more than once.
Yeah, so the story...
There is the Song of the Sea, or the Song of the Sea, or perhaps even Hatikva. Yes, for example, in this particular case,
it is a remarkably complex and layered story. What exactly did Moses bring? What did he take, or what did he change? In what ways did the Midianites or other groups influence him? I honestly do not know. It begins in the first centuries of the Common Era, linking Moses to the connection between Moses and Akhenaten. I mean, people talk about the links between, about the origin. This goes back to the first centuries CE, and Freud makes a big deal out of it in his book. And there's an entire tradition that goes along with it. It could be, I don't know. I think it's one. I have no doubt that this is one of the most significant influences. After Akhenaten, Egypt gradually loses its power. It withstands the late Bronze Age collapse because it has the Nile and all that. But new great empires emerge. The Persians, the Assyrians, then the Hellenistic. I mean, later the Greeks conquer Egypt, and gradually things change a bit. They absorb some influences, but continue with the worship in the temples. With Hellenism, there is further erosion, and it seems to me that by the first few centuries, CE, sometime in the first few centuries, or the later or middle ones, the story of Egypt, in the sense of the Egyptian religion and the temple and everything, disappeared. It is truly important to understand the significance of this temple. It represents the primordial mound from the creation story, and it possesses a very specific shape. It begins with a wide public courtyard, gradually narrowing as you approach the Holy of Holies, which is encased by 5 walls, with corridors and rooms tucked between them. It is exactly the same thing. The fact is, this is clearly a temple structure. To my eyes, it looks far more like a Hebrew temple than a ziggurat. Do you see what I'm getting at? Although I don't know anything research-wise about it, but from what I'm looking at, it seems to me.
There's a book. There's a Dr. Shapira from Ra'anana who wrote a few books about it, and he does link it more to the temple.
And he says that the Egyptian temple is the model.
Yes, he thinks there's an Egyptian influence here. Yes, he even sees it in the palace structure. Yes, especially
I realized
in
right
the
away
palace
that what I was hearing sounded correct. While reviewing the research last week for this talk, when I looked at the temple's shape, and it's so clear. The resemblance is incredible. The temple starts wide and narrows. I'm not sure they copied it, but the idea of a public courtyard becoming more intimate until only King Isaac left. Yacha very similar. Israel says that the differences in his book are that in the temple of silence they didn't speak, while in Egypt they generally manifest the divine through words. As we said, the words are part of the thing. The Egyptians, by the way, had two types of writing: hieroglyphs and a script for everyday use. Hieroglyphs are, in a sense, the temple. The world is a hieroglyph of the gods. That's what Jung said, by the way. Carl Gustav Jung understood Egypt. He said that the world is simply a vast hieroglyph of the gods, and the temple is, in essence, the world itself. It actually holds everything within it. The paintings, you see how the paintings start on the walls, and then they go and spread to the pillars and the ceiling too, and in the end, nothing is left. In the later period, there was nothing left in the temple that wasn't completely painted. It shows what was in the past. It shows what is happening in the present. He demonstrates geographical knowledge, mythological knowledge, the primordial gods, everything. It's all encompassing. The Egyptians, by the way, also believed in eternal life. You have to, there are all sorts of tests. We mentioned the first test, yes, the weighing of the heart, but you have several souls. You have the ka, that's the soul that passes on after death. It needs the offerings, everything that's brought, so it can take it to the afterlife. I said that according to the Egyptians, there are three souls: the ach, the ka, and the ba. Each one of them has a slightly different role. Later on, they even started adding information to the coffins. They began to write. All these things were also meant to accompany you and ensure that you would enter the world, the good paradise, and not fall into the bad. But the figure of the world, mind you, is ultimately the same figure hinted at among both the hunter-gatherers and the Sumerians. The world itself is chaos, constantly trying to break through and dismantle form. In the Egyptian view, it will return at the end of days to dismantle the world. The king and the priesthood, all the time, their whole way of life, they're constantly putting a finger in the dike. Yes, the Dutch myth about the boy who puts his finger in the dike to plug it. They're always pushing. The Egyptian holidays are also interesting. The festival of the Tavded. My family and I are originally from Jerusalem for many years. Whenever we attend the funeral service held at the cemetery, immediately following the burial ceremony, we bring out traditional eggs and savory burekas. There are various local delicacies, and we all partake in them together. It is essentially a shared meal with the departed. The fundamental basis of this ritual is communion. It serves as a profound acknowledgement of death. Let's remember that in both Neolithic villages and Egyptian villages, village religiosity continues in the same way. There is a development where we start to see small stelae with ears on them that you keep in your home. You can talk to the gods. We are already seeing such a relationship in the later period, but all the rituals with that early Neolithic and Paleolithic flavor are preserved. And you see that the rural way of life, by the way, even in medieval Europe, preserves very ancient things and continues more or less in ways similar to how it had continued. So during the Festival of the Dead, for example, in Egypt, they do propaganda, a procession, a crowd in the center, and then other gods. It starts on the Nile. They walk along the banks of the Nile. They walk in a procession to the city of the dead. They sit down. We make music, or rather we sing, inviting the dead to join in. And at the very end of the holiday, remember, it's very similar to what happens in Babylon. What happens in Babylon, you remember at the New Year, right? The king lies with the priestess. It's not clear if it's his daughter, but with the priestess to renew the universe. Here too, at the end of the ritual, the king goes to visit Hathor, the goddess of marriage. I assume she is represented by a priestess, and he spends the night with her. Since the king is now a living incarnation of the god Horus, he's truly divine. So the worship is essentially a royal cult. The king offers the gods all the abundant bounty of the land. And as we said, you also had small altars in your homes where you could perform all sorts of little rituals and offerings there.
In other words, it's a type of domestic cult that we see throughout the entire region and across many periods. Domestic cults were also common in Israel and Judah. We see it at every site we excavate.
Yes. Beyond that, there was also magic. I mean, if the little bit is the good wisdom of the good, then we also have magic. And what's interesting is that the magician retains something of ancient shamanism. Like when you think of voodoo, when you think about well the voodoo imagery, then you understand what's the connection to shamanism. There's some kind of connection again with the things, but this time to perform magic manipulation. And actually, there are voodoo dolls in Egypt too. If I'm your enemy, you make a doll of me, you stab it, you pour wax on it, you curse it, and in the end, you throw it into the fire. If you really want to hurt me, well, then I suppose you should just go ahead and do it. Beyond that, there are even expressions that border on mysticism, and there is theological speculation emerging. It's not quite a theory yet, but it's starting to be. It's starting to be a much more orderly, much more organized thinking about things. I want to go back to what I started with. This ability to translate gods that begins in Mesopotamia. This is essentially the concept that Hellenism later promotes. It enables translatability, the translation of the gods, and an international world with international law, along with the ability to switch between systems without issue and move between them. And this is also the concept that returns to Europe in the 17th and 18th centuries. This is the mentality that the Enlightenment promoted in Europe in the 17th and 18th centuries. And there is something interesting in the fact that the modern world, the axial age we will be discussing, begins to speak in the name of a different world, a world of a different morality, a morality not based on power, prosperity, and success, and modernity returns to the ancient world in the sense that she is unfamiliar with it. Since the 17th century, man has been constructed as a utilitarian economic figure. It recognizes no ideal beyond this world. It only recognizes it when you define the individual. Yes, you know Marx. Marx is ultimately a Mill, who is Locke, who is Hobbes, even Machiavelli. Not exactly, but in the same ballpark. Machiavelli is a very complex subject, and I really, really like him. He's a very interesting thinker, but that's a view of human nature. A person is a singular entity developing from within. Their character, morals, and ideals are fixed. Inherently utilitarian, they maximize economic utility. Thus, it is in their interest to cede power to the state, cooperate, and uphold the contract. And these property and contract become the foundation for the entire concept of modern individuality. And it's interesting because, essentially it had to jump from the axial age back to worlds where only this world exists so that we could return to the, right? And this modern world is an immanent framework in which all the laws determine everything from within. The world that preceded the one where these ideals of prosperity emerged was the opposite. These were entirely polytheistic worlds, open to outside influence and penetration, but they still lacked what emerged during the axial age, a completely different kind of God that can be translated into any other deity. He has an ethical code that he adheres to, and he demands that you adhere to it as well. The essential similarity between man and God, which appears in Greece, in Buddhism, in Israel and Judea, also in Confucianism. Confucianism is a bit of a different story. We won't get into that. If we have to cover China in depth as well, we'll wear ourselves out. It's quite a task as it is. And I should mention that this particular event is going to take place at a significantly later point in time. He's waiting for the late Bronze Age collapse. But before the late bronze, before its collapse, we have to talk about about the smaller empires that were born during this interim period between 1700, between 1800 and 1100. By 1100, the whole world had collapsed. Only Egypt remains because it has tourism, it can sustain itself, but the kingdoms that appear in the middle are the ones I find interesting, namely Mycenae. Oh, it's in Crete or maybe a button. The Hittites in Anatolia, the Mitanni, in the area, in the regions of Kurdistan, between Iraq, Turkey, and Syria. These are the most interesting kingdoms to me. I knew the least about them before I started doing this series with you. Everything I'm reading is just amazing. These are truly interesting kingdoms, and they also communicate a great deal of content, mythology, and philosophical thought to the Greek world and also to the Hebrew world. And that is what we actually, I sincerely hope we will be able to cover in our upcoming meeting. God, I think we could focus on the Hurrians and the Hittites. It's also not clear what the distinction is between them from a certain point on. It's a really complex story. I don't know who's a Hurrian and who's a Hittite, you know? If they are Hurrian kingdoms that are under the Hittites, and there is a region that is constantly changing hands between the Hurrian kingdom of Mitanni and the Hittites, and basically the Hurrians started from within the Mesopotamians. Started as cities within, I mean, as part of the Mesopotamian cities. So it's a very complex story, but in my opinion, it's the most interesting one.
Yes, of course. These are the countries that have influenced us. However, I want to tell you that I have spoken quite a lot with researchers. It's true that we probably don't fully grasp how much the Mitanni influenced us and the entire region, but still, if I look at the archaeology, especially when I find all these seals and items that represent the royal house, for example, in Jerusalem, we see a very significant Egyptian influence. Yes, symbols, Egyptian statues. It seems that in the salvage excavations and the sifting of the debris from the Temple Mount, they are mostly finding Egyptian artifacts. In other words, the Temple Mount was full of Egyptian artifacts, including many scarabs and many Egyptian statues. There are actual fragments of Egyptian statues, something the Bible doesn't always tell us, but which we clearly see in archaeology, not to mention the seal of Hezekiah and other seals we find that are very Egyptian, including the Egyptian ankh. With Hezekiah, there's also a scarab or a winged sun disk, an ankh. It doesn't get more Egyptian than what he has on the symbols of the royal house in Judah.
There's no doubt the impact was huge, but as you can see, all these many ideas, it's still not, let's try that again. So many ideas, you see, many ideas appeared in a certain way, like a spark. Yes, there is a God who is beyond all other gods, but he has a name, and the other gods are his incarnations, or perhaps he is the cosmos itself. He isn't. There is a heart, and there is ethics, and there is a little, but this ethics is not the ethics of God. He can't handle her, and he's not really that interested in her either. That's your problem. You want to enter the world of the good world, into their paradise. God has no interest in you, your morality, or what you do. I mean, it remains, I mean, we keep serving him. Even when you have exclusive monotheism, it sets you back in terms of the relationship and connection with the divinity, and also its abstraction. I mean, in its complex understanding between the abstract and the concrete, suddenly it becomes one thing. Even when you have the ability among the Egyptians to relate to a god directly in your heart, it is Pharaoh who is the god you are relating to. That is to say, there is perhaps the whole idea you're looking for, the counter-religion of Moses. Of course, we don't know Moses or no Moses. Yes, we don't. We say it according to tradition, right? We are Jews after all, but we don't know. Almost all the elements for a counter-religion are present, but the central element, turning God into something, first of all, turning all other gods into false, fake ones, and God into one who cannot be identified with anything. Those two elements together are the source. You know what? To anti-Semitism, to the institutionalization of it. It starts here. They hate Jews for this and Christians too. Why? What do you want? Why am I Alex saying Apollo or Chaim saying Hashem Amphor? Why the issue with that? Why this obsession with exclusivity? This people shall dwell alone thing. You could say the people shall dwell alone stems from Egypt. They were in exile for 2 millennia. So you're right. Plenty of influence, no doubt. But I don't see it. I haven't seen it in all the papyri I've just read or the inscriptions on the pillars. I haven't seen anything. It's possible it exists and they'll find more, discover more. Yeah, we don't know, but from what we can see, it doesn't quite reach that point. It's not a situation where he goes, Moses grew up in Egypt. He learns this, and then he comes and transcribes it onto the tablets. No, there's something here. Something is happening here that's more than that. It could be traditions that came from...
I'm going to bring up something else that doesn't quite add up for me. If we're talking about Moses coming from the school of Akhenaten, yeah, I don't know. One of the priests, let's say, and in general, these priests described in the Bible all have Egyptian names, Phinehas and such, right?
Yes, of course, well done.
Let's say they came from Egypt, but the story we have about God, as is told in his meeting with the people of Israel, the Exodus, is that he is a very verbal God. He is truly nothing at all like the God of Akhenaten. He is a God who is present, a God who possesses very human emotions.
National.
He watches, and when he does watch, he is a jealous God. I mean, that really does not align with the vision of Akhenaten. So I find myself thinking, on one hand,
Akhenaten would tell you that you're primitive in some way, that you're backward.
In the case of Akhenaten, his God, the sun, would never descend, interfere, check up on what you are doing, or become angry with you. No, it is the source of all life. That is its only role. It does not mess around with you, not at all. She won't come to help you on the battlefield either, right? It's not. So the story of Moses is a very Canaanite, Mitani, or whatever you want to call it, story, but it's not an Egyptian one. No, at least not according to Akhenaten. Yeah, that doesn't quite add up for me. But yeah, on the other hand, I do see...
Because you have almost all the elements. I'm telling you, the real scandals are these two things. I am that I am, and a jealous God, and all the other gods.
And you have a great deal of influence on holy artifacts. Right? The Ark of the Covenant is a very Egyptian artifact. The snake is the most Egyptian symbol there is. There's no question about it. I mean, in terms of symbols, we really see that even in the Bible, there's an influence there. I mean, our religion, our worship is a kind of synthesis of Egyptian elements with Canaanite, Levantine, Mytanian elements. I don't know. It's some kind of hybrid. It's really very interesting.
Yes, but some of the elements you call Canaanite, Mitanni, and so on are Mesopotamian, Sumerian, and Akkadian elements that filtered through those cultures. I mean, there's this flow because of the crash, right? So there's this flow of many cultures in different ways that usually through the bumpy paths of the tribes to create some kind of unified perception. But I'm not aware of any example of a counter religion of this kind. The Israeli who says all your gods are just bullshit. It is all lies, pure deceit. There is nothing and there is no me to speak of. You simply cannot identify me. You really cannot perform that specific trick in the same way that you are able to do it with those other items. It all comes down to these two things. People once debated monotheism. Now we know there are many types. Early monotheism existed in Egypt, and animism holds monotheistic potential. I mean, it's not. What's interesting is that the fundamental elements are what make the Jews and something completely different against the backdrop of the religiosity of their time. Just like Greek political and scientific thought becomes something completely different against the backdrop of its time when someone comes along and says everything is water. There is one principle that can be observed quite empirically. It is not actually present here, is it? He already understands that things are a process of constant change. It is...
I think we've jumped ahead a bit to our next conversation, which is what's happening with the pivot revolution and all these changes.
She came, we said we're having a meeting. And later,
Whitney.
the later ones, and later,
We jumped 2 conversations ahead, yes.
we'll keep jumping around because this shift, this whole axial age thing is critical. Jaspers talks about it in the 40s. He really talks about a transition from a cosmological world to this world, moving to another world, and about a transition from darkness to light. It's not a concept that's easy to grasp. Even Eric Coughlin, a great historian, a huge researcher, he qualifies the idea of Jaspers, but he too he also exaggerates a bit in what happened there. At the end of the day, we are looking here at processes. You see that the initial mimetic process is converted by a metic process, and the metic process is converted by a theoretical process. You see how the moment the gods become many things in the polytheistic world, a hawk, a storm, and so on, the possibility for conceptual thinking is created because they shift from being signifiers of something to being a concept. Right? A concept is something that has many uses, many applications. Its usage determines its meaning. You know, you can use it for all sorts of things. I mean, you can see processes here that lead to all sorts of levels. It's not about any kind of break or sudden departure, but you can't take away the uniqueness that young Aidan has. That you can't take away. It's not something you can argue with. That's what I think, and I hope we'll get to, when we reach the younger era, I'll try to do something about Greece and Israel briefly. We say the history is still ignoring Buddhism and Confucianism. Time is short, and they didn't shape our modern world. So our scope is limited. I'd love for the Chinese to cover this more accurately. That would benefit us all, making us more modern and sophisticated.
Okay, excellent. Oh, Dr. Yoav Ashkenazy, thank you so very much for joining us today. All the way over there in far-off Vienna, I truly appreciate your time. Please do take good care of yourself, and we would absolutely love to have you back again for another episode in the future. And by the way, there is still that one episode with you on the topic of rituals that I really need to get around to uploading.
The very first one we did.
The one we recorded, yes, at that lovely little cafe in Jerusalem.
Outside, yes, it's over at Hansen's.
Everything will be included too. Friends, thank you very much to you as well. I feel awkward constantly bringing this up, but this channel only exists thanks to the people who donate and support it. And truly, for me to be able to continue producing content like this, I need your help. Click the link.
Back in Shomer and Akedshin, they used to say that God would cry at 30 shekels an hour. They installed a complex tear-producing mechanism. If you fail to pay or use a fake coin, you are finished. They would punish you with extreme severity. So please, I am begging you, cry at 30 shekels an hour. Money certainly existed back then, but it was nothing like the currency we use today.
I want to thank you. Thank you so very much, Dr. Ashkenazy, and all my dear friends. I truly, honestly do need your help right now. The links are provided below, so please go there. It will only take a single minute. Thank you all so very much. Goodbye now.